The question is this: what exactly is happening when two people meet? The conventional answer is that two separate beings, you and I, each with our own story, our own body, our own interior life, come into contact and exchange something: words, feelings, ideas, warmth. The metaphor is transactional, and it is so deeply embedded in our language that we scarcely notice it. But the yogic tradition, which I'm totally in love with, and Patanjali in particular, who I revere from the depth of my soul, these traditions and Patanjali offer a different account. And once you have seen it, you cannot quite unsee it. Patanjali defines the entire field of mind as vritti, modifications, whirlings, patternings arising in chitta, the substrate of consciousness. His second sutra is the whole of yoga in 7 syllables. Yogas chit vritti nirodha. Yoga is the stilling of the whirlings, like a whirlpool, of mind. Whatever appears to us appears as a vritti. Perception is a vritti, memory is a vritti, concept, imagination, dream, doubt, love, grief, all vrittis. There's no exception clause, which means when I meet you, I do not meet you. I meet the vritti of you arising in the field of my own awareness. Your face, your voice, the warmth of your presence, the history I carry with you, all of it is patterning in chitta. And you, on your side, meet the vritti of me. We do not touch, we pattern. This is not a diminishment, it is a redescription of what was already the case, seen more precisely. Now consider something even more interesting. Consider what happens across distance when there is no shared sensory field. In other words, no room, no body, no breath in common. The vritti of the other must be constructed almost entirely from shabda, word or sign, and smriti, memory trace, samskara. An email arrives, a text pings, a voice note plays. Each is a thin thread of vekari, outer speech, from which I reconstruct an entire person. This is why remote interaction feels ghost-like, not because the other is less real, but because the vritti I build of them is sparser, faster, and more easily distorted by projection, what the yogic tradition calls adhyasa, the superimposition of what I already carry onto what is actually arriving. Add to that FaceTime and Zoom and what I'm doing right now. Add the visual vitri. The face returns. The eyes meet eyes, and something thickens. A measure of intimacy is restored. Because now, drishti, the seeing, has something to rest on. But the other, the so-called other, is still a rendered pattern, photons on glass, pixels resolving into what the mind names beloved or colleague or stranger or enemy. Ghost-like, beautifully so, but ghost-like. Now, what about touch? What about intimacy? Here the argument meets its most tender resistance. And here the yogic tradition is most uncompromising. Even the caress, even the kiss, even the deepest embrace in the deepest hour of the night is vritti. sparsha, touch, is one of the tanmatras, the subtle elements, and it becomes the vritti of touch only when it registers in chitta. The beloved skin is known only to me as a tactile qualia arising in awareness. The warmth of another body is a modification in the field I already am. Kashmir Shiaism, which never met in intimacy it wished to deny, goes further. Abhinav Gupta calls this chamatkar. Chamatkar, the flashing of consciousness recognizing itself through the appearance of two. The two are vritti configurations. The intimacy is the recognition beneath them, which is to say, the most embodied encounter you have ever had was consciousness meeting itself in pattern form and then calling it you and me. This is not less than we thought intimacy was. It is infinitely more. Every encounter, every keystroke or caress moves through four levels. The yogic tradition calls them para, pashyanti, madhyama, vekhari. And though the schema was first developed for speech, it applies to any communicative act. Para is the undifferentiated pulsation of awareness, spanda, before anything has stirred, the pure potential of the encounter. Pashyanti is the seeing impulse, the unitary flash in which the encounter is already known but not yet formed. Think of it as a cloud of probabilities, the urge before the word, the tenderness before the reaching. Madhyama is the inner formulation, mental speech, inner dialogue, intention taking shape, the sentence rehearsing itself, the caress choosing its trajectory. And then finally, bakery is the outer expression, what you're hearing now. The message sent, the spoken word, the hand arriving at the shoulder, the keystroke, the kiss, the click. And here is what the tradition insists upon, and what contemporary neuroscience is just beginning to confirm from its own side. The earlier stages precede conscious awareness of the interaction. By the time I register, I'm speaking to you, para and pashyanti have already moved. The readiness potential is already fired. The affective priming has already occurred. The interaction is well underway before I arrive to it. Every meeting begins before I know it has begun. There is a way of saying vrittis interacting with vrittis that quietly reinstates the dualism the argument was meant to dissolve. It still suggests two vrittis reaching across a gap toward each other, like two hands in the dark. But in strict non-duality, there's no gap. The vrittis do not meet between two separate minds. They co-arise as a single patterning in one awareness that is presenting itself as both poles. The interaction is the appearance structure of a unified event, consciousness vibrating as apparently two, whose seeming meeting is itself a further vritti in the same field. The other is already myself, patterned as other. This is pratyabhijna, recognition, the heart of trika. So the ghost-like quality of remote encounter is not that the vrittis are thinner across distance. The awareness is undiminished. The rendering is past, that is all. So why does this matter? If every interaction is vritti with vritti arising in a single field of awareness, then something shifts in how we live. The offense, the vilification, the flattery, the seduction, the insult, each is a patterning event in the field I already am. The person on the other end of the email is a vritti configuration. I am co-authoring it through my own samskaras. Intimacy is not lost in remote control, it is thinned in its sensory bandwidth, while the ontological ground, shared awareness, is untouched. And the witness, the Sakshi, can be located before para stirs, which is where all interaction becomes optional, ornamental, and free. This is not a metaphor. It is a place you can go. It is a place you already are when you know how to look. Let me take you there right now. Sit as you sit for your practice, spine long, eyes soft or closed. Let the body settle the way water settles when the glass is set down. Okay? Now take 3 unhurried breaths. Not deep breaths, just noticed breaths. Let the exhale be longer than the inhale. The way it is when the body remembers it is safe. Now bring to mind a recent interaction, any interaction, an email you sent this morning, a conversation from yesterday, a glance exchanged on the street. Do not choose an important one, choose an ordinary one. Notice this interaction is arising in you now as a vritti, a patterning. It is not happening, it is being remembered. And the remembering is itself a modification in awareness. Feel where in the field of you this vritti is arising, not where in the body, where in the field. Now gently ask, who is aware of this vritti? Do not answer with a word. Let the question do its own work. Let it turn awareness back on itself. Something notices the vritti. Rest there for a moment. Now, more slowly still, ask, what was here before this vritti arose? Before the memory of the interaction? Before Pashyanti stirred into seeing, before Para began to pulse. There is a stillness that is not the absence of movement. It is the ground of movement. It does not wait for the vritti to arise. It does not disappear when the vritti forms. This is Sakshi, the witness. Not a witness who watches, a witnessing that is. Rest here. If a vritti arises, a thought, a feeling, an image of someone, notice that it arises in you, not to you, in you. You're not being visited by it. It is being formed within the field you already are. And you, the Sakshi, are prior to it. You're prior to Para. You are the awareness in which Para itself first stirs. Stay here as long as the sitting allows. Now, from this location, bring back to mind the interaction you began with, the email, the conversation, the glance. Notice from here, the interaction is optional. It is ornamental. It is free, not because it does not matter, but because you were never inside it. You were the field in which it appeared. The other person, vritti. Your response, vritti. The entire exchange, a patterning of consciousness meeting itself, briefly in the appearance of two, you and me. And you, the witness, were never in the room. You were the room. It reminds me of an old story that I read where an English woman uh, met this great Swami yogi in India. And she said, Swamiji, I'd like to invite you to London. And he said, Madam, I am London. Think about that. When you're ready, let the eyes open. Let the world return as vritti, because that is what it has always been. Only now you know where you're standing when you meet it. You are standing before para, which is to say, you're standing nowhere as no one, and the meeting is free. Hari Om Tat Sat.